She knocked on the door of room 317. She said one word. Housekeeping. She was 8 months pregnant. She was wearing a uniform, and the hotel she was cleaning had her husband's name on it. When he found her there, pushing that cart down the hallway, she did not cry. She did not explain. She did not beg. She looked at the man who had been planning to leave her since the day she told him she was pregnant, and she said, calmly, without blinking, "Room 317 is vacant until Thursday. I'll have it turned by 10. The folder dropped from his hand, his papers scattered across the floor. And something inside him, something he had spent 6 years carefully building, shattered. Not because she was angry, because she wasn't. She had spent 7 months knowing everything. Every transfer, every lie, every text message his sister sent to cover for him, every lunch his mother arranged to make sure Clara's best friend stayed silent. She knew, and she had been patient, and she had been preparing, and now it was his turn to wait. This is the story of a woman who chose dignity over drama, strategy over rage, freedom over the illusion of a perfect life, and her cold, quiet reaction destroyed him more completely than any explosion ever could have. The lesson this story carries: the most powerful thing a woman can do is refuse to perform her own pain for the person who caused it.
Housekeeping. The word was soft. Matter of fact, the kind of word you say 100 times a day when it is your job. Clara Whitfield knocked twice on the door of room 317 and waited. She shifted her weight to her left foot. Her lower back had been aching since 6 that morning. Her feet? She had stopped looking at her feet 2 weeks ago. They were not her feet anymore. They were 2 small swollen planets orbiting the larger planet of her belly. She knocked again. No answer. She took out her keycard. She pressed it to the reader. The light blinked green. She let herself in. The room smelled like coffee and expensive cologne. A particular kind of cologne. The kind that came in a heavy glass bottle and cost more per ounce than most people spent on groceries in a week. The bed had been slept in, but not wrecked. Neat habits. One person. She had learned, in 3 months of this work, to read a room in 45 seconds. One guest. Neat habits. Left-handed. The notepad sat on the left side of the nightstand. Drank the coffee, but did not touch the pastry basket. Had a phone charger plugged into the left side outlet and a laptop bag placed at a precise 45-degree angle against the wall. Someone who controlled their environment. Someone who liked things arranged exactly so. She began stripping the bed. This was the part where her brain usually went quiet. That was what she had not expected about this work. Her mother had told her, years ago, that cleaning gave you time to think. Ruth Hensley had cleaned other people's houses for 30 years while composing arguments, solving problems, and raising her daughter on the wages. Clara had always assumed her mother was being generous. She had been being accurate. Clara had done her best thinking of the last 3 months with her hands in a pair of rubber gloves. She was folding a pillow into a fresh case when she heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. She did not look up. Footsteps on carpet. Measured, confident. The walk of someone who owned the floor they were walking on. Which, in this case, was literally true. "Excuse me," a man's voice, controlled. "I'm looking for—" The voice stopped. Clara looked up. Grant Whitfield stood in the doorway of room 317. He had a leather folder in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. He was wearing the gray suit he always wore on Tuesdays. She had cataloged that detail without meaning to over 6 years of marriage, the way you catalog things about a person when you spend enough time watching them. His expression was one she had never seen before. Not in 6 years. Not once. It was the expression of a man whose carefully constructed world had just developed a crack too large to explain away. He said nothing. She said nothing. Then she tucked the pillow into its case, set it on the bed, and reached for the second one. Clara. His voice was barely above a whisper. She pulled the second pillow from the case. She shook it. She examined the seam for any damage. She pressed the corner smooth with her palm. Clara! Louder. Now, something cracking underneath the control. She placed the pillow on the bed. She smoothed the case with the flat of one hand. She straightened up, slowly, because at 8 months pregnant, you did not do anything quickly. And she looked at her husband. She looked at him with the kind of calm that takes 7 months of practice to achieve. Room 317 is vacant until Thursday, she said. I'll have it turned by 10. The leather folder fell from Grant's hand. She watched it hit the carpet. Papers fanned across the floor in a slow, graceless arc. She thought, with the quiet part of her brain, that someone should pick those up before housekeeping had to deal with them. Then she remembered that she was housekeeping. Inside, in the part of her that she kept very still and very private, she registered the moment. She had known this would happen eventually. She had just not known it would be a Tuesday, with those particular pants on. She thought, I have been cataloging his Tuesday suits for 6 years. I do not know what that says about me. I think it says I was paying attention to the wrong things for a very long time. She watched him pick up his papers. His hands were not quite steady. She pushed the cart down to the next room. The hallway smelled like industrial lavender and recycled air. The carpet was the color of burgundy wine. Her cart's wheels made a low, steady sound against the floor, a sound she had come to find oddly reliable. The kind of sound that did not change depending on who was watching. She knocked on the door of room 318. She did not look back. Behind her, she heard Grant say her name one more time, very quietly. The way you say a word when you are testing whether it still means what you thought it meant. She let herself into 318. The room smelled like nothing in particular, clean and neutral and waiting. She picked up her spray bottle and got to work. The break room on the 4th floor smelled like coffee and the industrial cleaner they used on the baseboards. The light was fluorescent and unkind to everyone in equal measure. There was a motivational poster on one wall that someone had drawn a mustache on. The microwave door had a crack in the handle that maintenance had been meaning to fix for 6 weeks. Nora Tatum was eating a cup of soup at the small table when Clara came in to fill her water bottle at 10:45. Nora had been at Whitfield Grand for 17 years. She had the unhurried, specific wisdom of a woman who had watched every variety of wealthy behavior from close range and found most of it, on the whole, unimpressive. She looked at Clara's face. You ran into him, Nora said. It was not a question. Clara filled her water bottle. She drank half of it, standing at the sink. She set it down on the counter and looked at the crack in the microwave handle. He dropped his folder, Clara said. Nora made a small sound. It might have been sympathy. It might have been satisfaction. With Nora, these were sometimes the same thing. How did he look? Nora asked. Clara thought about this. She thought about it honestly, the way she tried to think about everything now. Like someone had removed a load-bearing wall from inside him, she said, and he did not understand yet why the ceiling was shaking. Nora nodded slowly. Good, she said, and went back to her soup. The break room clock on the wall read 10:52. Outside the narrow window, the November sky was the color of old dishwater. A delivery truck idled in the alley below, its engine a low, patient rumble. Clara sat down across from Nora. She put both hands on her belly. The baby shifted, a slow, rolling movement, like a fish turning in still water. "One more floor today," Clara said. "One more floor," Nora agreed. "Then you go home and you rest. Doctor's orders." Dr. Foster did not order rest. "I'm ordering it," Nora said. 17 years in this hotel. I outrank your doctor." Clara smiled. It was a small smile, but it was a real one. She had not had many real smiles in the last 7 months. She had had managed smiles and polite smiles and the specific smile she wore at dinner parties when someone said something she disagreed with and she chose not to engage. But real ones had been rare. It was strange, she thought, that she had found them most often in this break room, over bad fluorescent light, with a woman who had known her for 3 months and did not require anything from her at all. She sat in her car in the parking garage on level 2 for 11 minutes before she started the engine. This was a habit she had developed. Not a bad habit, just a necessary one. The garage smelled like exhaust and cold concrete. The level 2 ceiling was lower than the others, and the lights were slightly dimmer. She had parked here every morning for 3 months because it was the spot furthest from the elevator, and no one who worked in the executive offices ever had reason to come down this far. She checked her phone. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. She turned it face down on the passenger seat. She put one hand on her belly. The baby was still, resting. Clara thought, good. Rest while you can. Things are about to get louder. Okay, she said, to the baby and to herself and to the cold air of the parking garage. It starts now. She sat with that for another full minute. Then she started the car. At home, she did not call Dee. She used to call Dee for everything. For 3 months, she had not called Dee once. She had been practicing this. The absence of that reflex no longer felt quite like loss. It felt more like something surgically removed. Not pleasant, but necessary. Something that had to come out before anything could heal properly. She called her mother instead. Ruth picked up on the second ring. "He found you," Ruth said. "Yes." A pause. Not an empty pause. A thinking pause. "Good," Ruth said finally. "Now it is his turn to wait." Clara stood at her kitchen window. The backyard was bare. The oak tree she had always liked was down to its last 3 leaves. They were holding on with a determination she recognized. "He looked scared, Mom," she said. "Underneath the control, he looked genuinely scared." "He should be," Ruth said. "He has been managing everything and everyone around him for so long that he forgot some people learn to manage back." Clara was quiet. "You are still all right?" Ruth asked. "I am still all right." "And the baby?" "Moving, active. She has opinions about everything." "Good," Ruth said. "She comes from a long line of women with opinions." After she hung up, Clara stood at the window for a while longer. The last 3 oak leaves were still holding. The November wind moved through them, but they did not let go. She thought, I know the feeling. She went to make tea. At 12:45 in the afternoon, Grant Whitfield sat behind the desk of the Chief Executive Officer's suite on the 14th floor of Whitfield Grand Hotel and stared at a point approximately 8 inches above his computer screen. His assistant Paul had knocked twice and been waved off both times. Grant was thinking. He was very good at thinking. He could find the angle on almost any situation. He could identify the narrative and redirect it. He had been managing narratives since he was 12 years old, when his father left, and his mother told the neighbors it was an extended business trip. He understood then that the family business and the family fiction were the same enterprise. He pulled out his phone. He dialed Clara's number. 3 rings, 4 rings, voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. He set the phone on the desk. He picked it up. He set it back down. He thought, she has been planning this. She did not look surprised. She did not look hurt. She looked like a woman who had arranged for him to find her. He thought, how long? He thought, what does she know? He stood up and went to the window. The city sprawled out below, gray and enormous and completely indifferent to anything happening on the 14th floor of a hotel with his name on it. He thought about the way she had said, Room 317 is vacant until Thursday. So calm, so precise. He had managed a great many things in his professional life. He had managed hostile acquisitions, wrongful termination suits, a minor bribery scandal in 2019 that never made the papers. He had managed his mother and his sister and 3 different boards of directors. He had never, not once in 6 years, successfully managed Clara's silences. He picked up his phone again. This time he did not dial Clara. He dialed a different number. The phone rang twice before it was answered. We may have a problem, he said quietly. The sound of a phone buzzing. Once, twice, a pause, then again. Clara was at her kitchen table at 2 in the afternoon. She was eating crackers and a soft cheese and looking at a manila folder that she had opened and closed 14 times in the past hour. The folder was not thick. It did not need to be thick. The most important documents never were. Inside, bank statements showing $400,000 in unexplained transfers across 18 months. A lease agreement for an apartment in the Meridian building, signed by Grant Whitfield, dated 22 months prior. A photograph she had needed to have taken and wished she had not needed. She closed the folder. She ate another cracker. Her phone buzzed again. Grant again. The 4th time in 40 minutes. She let it go to voicemail. Inside, she thought, he is calling because he is scared. Grant, when frightened, sounds exactly like Grant when in control. Same voice, same cadence, same measured, reasonable sentences. She used to find that reassuring, that consistency, that steadiness. She had mistaken it for safety. Now she knew the difference. Fear in a man who cannot afford uncertainty sounds exactly like certainty. The difference is what he is afraid of losing. She had known about the affair for 7 months. She had found the receipt on a Thursday morning in April. She had been taking his jackets to the dry cleaner, a task she had taken over when the housekeeper was sick, a task she had not minded because it was Thursday and she liked Thursdays, and the dry cleaner was on the same block as the good coffee shop. A receipt from a florist, 12 red roses, dated 3 weeks prior. Their anniversary was 4 months away. Her birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. Those flowers had been different. Something large and corporate-looking that arrived at the house in a van. Something ordered from an account, not chosen by hand. She had stood on the sidewalk outside the dry cleaner for a full minute. Then she went to the coffee shop and sat down and thought about it very carefully. She did not confront him that night. She found the florist online. She called the next morning, pretending to verify a delivery address. The delivery address was in the Meridian building on the east side of the city. She found the lease 2 days later. She hired a private investigator 3 weeks after that. It cost $4,000 from the savings account her mother had told her to keep separate and private and her own. Ruth had said, when Clara was 24 years old, a woman needs money that belongs only to her. Not for distrust, for reality. Reality always arrives without an invitation, and it is better to have a coat already on when it does. Clara had kept the account for 8 years, not because she expected this, because her mother's advice had the quality of things true whether or not you needed them yet. The investigator gave her the photograph in February. She had been sick for a week after. Not grief sick, exactly, recognition sick. The particular nausea of seeing confirmed in a photograph what some part of you has been quietly knowing for longer than you realized. She had put the photograph in the manila folder. She had put the folder in the locked drawer of her desk in her home office. She had gone back to work, which at that point meant making calls for the charity gala that consumed 6 months of every year and attending the quarterly Whitfield Enterprises spouse luncheon, where she made small talk and represented the family well. She had started working at the hotel in August. 3 months ago, she had applied under her maiden name, Hensley. She had given her mother's address. She had interviewed with the housekeeping manager, a serious woman named Joyce, who asked 3 practical questions and hired her on the spot because they were short-staffed and Clara was organized and showed up on time. She had not told anyone, not Dee, not her mother, initially, not Dr. Foster, who had enough to manage tracking the pregnancy without adding the information that her patient was mopping floors on the 3rd level. She had told Ruth 4 weeks in, when Ruth called and asked why she sounded so tired. "I have been cleaning hotel rooms," Clara said. A long silence. "Grant's Hotel?" Ruth said. "Yes." Another silence. Longer. "You are gathering information," Ruth said. "I am understanding the landscape," Clara said. "There is a difference." "Not to your back, there isn't," Ruth said. "Come for dinner Sunday." She had. The phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. Not Grant this time. An unknown number. A local area code. She almost let it go. Then she picked it up. A text message. Not a call. She read it. "I think we should talk. Not for the reason you might think. I know who you are, and I know what you do not know yet. Please, my name is Savannah." Clara read it 3 times. She set the phone face down on the table. She looked at the manila folder. She looked at her glass of water. She picked up the phone and read the message a 4th time. Inside, she thought, of course. Of course there is something I do not know yet. There is always another layer. Every time I thought I had reached the bottom, there was another floor below. She put the phone down. She finished her crackers. She saved the number. Grant came home at 5:45, early for him. She heard the front door, and then the particular sound of his footsteps in the entryway. Confident steps that paused, just briefly, before continuing into the kitchen. She was sitting at the kitchen table, with a glass of water and the kind of expression she had been working on for 7 months. Readable as calm, legible as nothing else. He looked at her, she looked at him. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," she said, "we do." She did not get up. She did not busy herself at the counter. She did not offer him anything or make any of the 100 small domestic gestures that usually filled the space between them. She sat and she looked at him and she waited. He sat down across from her. He placed both hands on the table, open, palms up, the posture of a man being honest or performing honesty. She had watched him use this posture in boardroom meetings for 6 years. "You were at the hotel," he said. "Yes." "In a uniform." "Yes." "How long?" 3 months. He looked at her hands. He looked at her belly. He looked at the glass of water. He was processing, she knew, calculating, trying to determine what she knew and how she knew it and what the most efficient response was. "Are you—" He stopped. He started again. "Were you doing this because of buwistos?" "I was doing it," Clara said, "because I needed to understand what it felt like. To work in one of your buildings. To move through a place with your name on it and have no one see you." She paused. It was educational. The word landed in the space between them like something solid. Grant was very still. "Is there something you want to tell me?" he asked. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long, full moment. She thought about all the things she could say. The florist receipt, the lease, the photograph, The $400,000 moving through accounts she had not known existed. The 7 months of documentation she had built with the patient, methodical focus of a woman who was once very good at research. Not yet, she said. Are you hungry? She got up and went to the refrigerator. Grant Whitfield sat at his kitchen table with his hands still open on the wood and felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt it in his chest and in his stomach and at the back of his throat. He felt the specific cold horror of a man who has been managing a situation discovering that the situation has been managing him. At 9 o'clock, he tried again. She was in bed with a book. She said she was tired, and her back hurt, and she did not want to talk. All three of these things were true. He went to his study at 11:30. She heard him go. She heard the quiet, careful click of the study door. She heard the low sound of his laptop opening. She lay still. She breathed slowly. She listened to the sound of him, trying to understand what he was up against. Inside, she thought, he is preparing. He thinks if he can determine exactly what I know, he can design the right response. He has spent his entire professional life doing this. It has always worked. He cannot imagine a version of this where preparation does not give him the advantage. He cannot imagine that I spent 7 months making sure the advantage was mine. She put her hand on her belly. The baby moved, a slow, deliberate roll, an elbow or a knee pressing outward as if to say, I am here, I am present, I am paying attention to. I know, Clara said softly. Me too. At 6:15 the next morning, while Grant was in the shower, she picked up her phone. She pulled up the unknown number. She typed 6 words. Tomorrow, the Westfield Cafe. 10 a.m. She stared at the message. She added 2 more words. Come alone. She sent it. She put the phone in her robe pocket and went to make oatmeal. The kitchen window was dark with early morning. The oak tree in the backyard was a black shape against a slightly less black sky. 2 of the 3 leaves were gone. The last one was still holding. Rain on glass. The Westfield Cafe smelled like espresso and wet wool in the particular warmth of a small room full of people coming in from the cold. The windows were fogged at the edges. The chairs were mismatched wood, and the tables were close together, and the whole place had the quality of somewhere that had been exactly the same for 20 years and had no plans to change. Clara arrived at 9:58. Savannah Cole was already there. Back table, coat still on, both hands around a mug the way you hold something when you need the warmth but are too unsettled to actually drink. She looked younger than the photograph and more tired. Clara sat down across from her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The cafe noise moved around them, the hiss of the espresso machine, the low murmur of other conversations, the sound of rain intensifying against the windows. Clara thought, I built a version of her in my head over 7 months. I needed the villain to have a particular shape, a particular kind of confidence, a particular kind of cruelty. She does not have that shape. She looks like someone who has not slept in 3 weeks. You are further along than I realized, Savannah said. Her voice was quiet and somewhat wrecked, like something that had been used too hard recently. He told me, he said the pregnancy was planned. He said you both wanted it. He said your marriage had been over in every real sense for years. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. He said you lived separate lives, that you were... He said you were fine with the arrangement. Clara looked at her hands around the mug. Inside, she thought, there it is, the story he told her, the version of our marriage that made everything acceptable. I was fine with the arrangement. We were modern adults. No one was being hurt. He also told you, Clara said carefully, that we had a marriage in name only. Yes. He told you I was aware of his relationships outside the marriage. He said you both were adults who had come to a mutual understanding. And you believed him. Savannah looked at her mug. I wanted to believe him, she said. There is a difference. The rain against the window, the espresso machine, the low warmth of other people going about their ordinary mornings. Yes, Clara said. There is a difference. She ordered tea from the passing server. She waited until it arrived. She wrapped her hands around the cup the same way Savannah was holding hers. Tell me what you found, she said. 3 weeks earlier, Savannah had been looking for a phone charger. Not a dramatic beginning. Not a discovery made in a moment of suspicion or jealousy. Just a charger. The apartment, the Meridian apartment that Grant paid for, and she thought of as theirs, had a desk with 3 drawers on the right side. The charger was usually in the second drawer. It was not in the second drawer. She tried the third drawer. Inside was a legal folder. Not hidden exactly, just placed there, the way documents are placed, when whoever put them there does not expect anyone else to be looking for a phone charger. She took the folder out. She was not a lawyer. She was not a financial professional. She was a junior architect from a firm in the south end of the city who had a good eye for proportion and a weakness for believing people she loved. But she had grown up with an accountant for a cousin, and she knew what financial documents looked like. Her name was on them, her full legal name, attached to account numbers she did not recognize. She photographed every page with her phone. She sent them to her cousin that night. Her cousin called the next morning. Savannah, her cousin said, do you know what these are? No, Savannah said. These are transfer records, her cousin said. Money moving through accounts with your name attached. Significant amounts. If anyone were ever to look at this, if there were ever an investigation or a legal proceeding, these documents make it appear that you were a knowing participant in those transfers. What transfers? Savannah asked. Her cousin told her. The Whitfield Family Trust, 18 months of movement, $400,000 distributed through subsidiary accounts, the kind of thing that was either brilliant tax planning or deliberate financial misconduct, depending on who was doing the explaining. And the explanation, according to the documents, pointed directly at Savannah Cole. Savannah showed Clara the photographs on her phone. She slid it across the table without comment. Clara looked at each image. She looked at them slowly and completely. She recognized some of the account structures. She had seen similar ones in the documents Wade had shown her. She had not known about the accounts with Savannah's name. She had not known that Grant had built his exit strategy on the foundation of another person's identity. Inside, she thought, I knew about the transfers. I did not know about this. He did not just take money. He needed someone to carry the blame if it ever came apart. And he chose her. Someone who trusted him. Someone he had told the most convenient lie to. Someone who would have no idea until it was too late. Does he know you found these? Clara asked. No, Savannah said. Keep it that way, Clara said. Why are you telling me this? Clara asked. The cafe had gotten fuller. The rain outside had settled into a steady, patient rhythm. A child at the next table was drawing on a napkin with a crayon. The smell of cinnamon from someone's order drifted between them. Savannah wrapped both hands tighter around her mug. Because I am not a weapon, she said. I am a person, and I think he was planning to use me as one. And I think you are the only other person in this situation who might actually understand what that feels like. Clara was quiet for a long moment. She thought about what it meant to be used as a narrative by a man who was very good at writing narratives. She had spent 6 years inside one, so had Savannah, although a different chapter of the same story. I have a lawyer, Clara said. He is good. If you want, I can give you his number. Savannah looked at her. Something shifted in the space between them. Not warmth exactly, not forgiveness or friendship or anything with a simple name. Something more specific and more durable. The recognition between two people who have been handed the same problem from different ends. Yes, Savannah said. I would like that. Clara wrote the number on a napkin. She slid it across the table. Savannah took it. She folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket. They sat for a while longer. They ordered more tea and more coffee. They did not talk about Grant in anything other than practical terms. They talked about the documents. They talked about timelines. They talked briefly about what came next. When they left, they did not hug. They did not exchange numbers, beyond the one Clara had already given. They walked out into the rain in different directions, but at the door, Savannah turned back. I am sorry, she said, for my part in this. I did not know the full picture, but I was inside it. I am sorry. Clara stood on the wet sidewalk. She thought about all the ways she could respond, the sharp ones, the hurt ones, the generous ones, the ones that protected her, and the ones that cost her something. I believe you, she said. That matters. Savannah nodded. She turned up her collar against the rain and walked away. Clara sat in the parking garage, at home for 9 minutes. She did not check her phone. She left it in her bag. She put both hands on the steering wheel, and she looked at the gray concrete wall of the garage, and she let herself feel everything she had kept very controlled in the cafe. The coffee shop. The documents with Savannah's name. The specific, cold calculation of what Grant had built and how he had built it. The way someone she had slept beside for 6 years had written a story in which other people were the villains so that he never had to be. She felt it all. She let it move through her, the way you let a wave move through you when you are standing in deep water, not fighting it, not drowning in it either. After 9 minutes, she picked up her phone. She called Wade Prescott's office. I have new information, she said when he answered. I need to come in. Tomorrow morning? Wade asked. Tomorrow morning, she said. She started the car. She thought, the building always knows what it is. The question is whether anyone is paying attention. She had been paying attention. Lavender. It arrived before Marjorie Whitfield did, as it always arrived. The particular, identifying smell of her perfume. Heavy and floral and slightly cold, like flowers kept in a refrigerator. Claire had been smelling that perfume in her home for 6 years. She had learned to recognize it the way you learn to recognize weather patterns. It meant something was coming. Marjorie did not call before she visited. She had never called before she visited because she did not consider her son's home to require that courtesy. Clara had managed this for 6 years with the specific, exhausting grace of a woman who understood the rules of someone else's house. She answered the door. Marjorie stood on the step with a shopping bag from a children's boutique and a look on her face that Clara had cataloged under management mode. I was in the area, Marjorie said, which was never true, but was always the opener. Come in, Clara said. Marjorie moved through the entryway the way she moved through every room of this house, with the settled ease of a person who considered the space fundamentally theirs. She set the shopping bag on the kitchen table and looked at Clara's belly with the expression she reserved for things that were both inconvenient and unavoidable. You look tired, Marjorie said. I am 32 weeks pregnant, Clara said. Tired is the condition. She put the kettle on. Marjorie arranged herself at the table. She removed her gloves 1 finger at a time. She folded them neatly and set them beside her handbag. Everything Marjorie did was neat, precise, nothing accidental. I wanted to make sure you were managing, Marjorie said. Grant mentioned you have been under some stress. Has he? The pregnancy can be taxing, emotionally as well as physically. A pause, a calibrated one. I want to make sure you are both approaching things with the right perspective. The kettle began to hiss. Inside, Clara thought, she knows something has shifted. She is here to assess the damage, to take inventory of what I know and what my face gives away. She poured the tea. I appreciate your concern, Clara said. And Grant's well-being, of course. He has been a small hesitation, the kind that looked unplanned and was not. He has seemed distracted. Work stress, Clara said pleasantly. Yes. Marjorie accepted the cup. He mentioned you had taken an interest in the hotel operations. The room was very quiet for just a moment. He mentioned that, Clara said. He said you had been visiting the property. I have been learning the business, Clara said. I thought it was time. Marjorie looked at her over the rim of her cup. Her eyes were a pale, sharp gray. Grant had her eyes. Clara had always noticed this, and had always found it slightly unnerving. At 8 months, Marjorie said. I have always found physical work clarifying, Clara said. My mother cleaned houses for 30 years. She did her best thinking with her hands busy. She looked at Marjorie steadily. I take after her in that. Something moved behind Marjorie's eyes. Not warmth, recalculation. Your mother is a capable woman, Marjorie said carefully. Yes, Clara said. She is. They drank their tea. They talked about small things. The baby's room, a repair the house needed, an event in the spring that Marjorie was chairing. Clara was polite and unhurried and gave nothing away. Marjorie was polite and unhurried and was trying to get something she was not getting. After 45 minutes, Marjorie left. Clara stood at the kitchen window and watched her car pull out of the driveway. She watched the taillights disappear at the end of the street. Inside, she thought, she knows the cracks are showing. She will call Grant tonight. She will report that I am controlled and unreadable. She will recommend a strategy. She has been the strategy architect of this family since before Grant knew what strategy meant. Clara rinsed both cups. She dried her hands. She went to her home office, and she locked the door. 3 days after Marjorie's visit, Clara sat in Wade Prescott's conference room on a Wednesday afternoon and looked at a printed screenshot placed in front of her on the table. It was a text message exchange between Grant and Brooke, dated 9 months ago, just after Clara had announced the pregnancy. Wade had highlighted the relevant sections in pale yellow. He had also written the word "read carefully" at the top in his small, precise handwriting. Wade did not annotate documents unless he considered it essential. She read carefully. Grant, we need to think about the timing here. If this goes the way I plan, she gets the standard settlement, and we do not have to worry about the trust provisions. Brooke, I can keep covering the Wednesday dinners if needed. Mom knows anyway, so do not worry about that front. Grant, good. Just need her calm until after the birth. Then it is straightforward. Claire read this 3 times. She placed the papers face down on the table. She took a breath, a full breath. In and out. Inside, she thought, he was planning this before the marriage broke. Not after. Not in response to distance or unhappiness or the particular entropy of a long relationship running out of fuel. He was planning it while things looked fine, while they were making the nursery, while she was choosing paint colors and scheduling the baby shower, and believing that whatever was broken between them was the kind of broken that could be fixed. He was planning it from the day she told him she was pregnant. She thought, I need her calm until after the birth. Then it is straightforward. She had been a timeline, a management problem with a due date. She picked the papers back up. She put them back in their proper order. She set them down again. What does standard settlement mean? She said. in the context of the trust provisions. Wade Prescott leaned forward. He had the face of a man who had been waiting for this exact question. He had a yellow legal pad and a pen, and he began to explain. The Whitfield Family Trust had been established by Grant's father before he left the family. It contained a clause, unusual but not unheard of in old money family structures, that protected a significant portion of the family assets in divorce proceedings unless the divorcing spouse could prove financial misconduct by the other party during the marriage. Marjorie had known about this clause since the trust was reactivated. Grant had known about it for 3 years. The plan, as best Wade had been able to reconstruct it, was elegant in the way that deeply cynical things can be elegant. Move money through accounts attached to Savannah's identity. Create a paper trail that pointed to a private affair rather than intentional misconduct. If Clara ever found the transfers and brought a claim, the money would appear to belong to the affair's financial support. Savannah would become the explanation. And Clara, with a new baby and a standard settlement, and the particular exhaustion of a woman who has just had her life dismantled, would have neither the energy nor the legal leverage to dig further. Wade tapped the yellow legal pad with his pen. The plan, he said, only works if they do not know you know. Clara looked at him. They do not know what I know, she said. Correct, Wade said. A pause. Then we proceed as planned, she said. Wade nodded. He made a note. He asked her 3 more questions. She answered them fully and precisely. She gave him dates and amounts and the name on the Meridian lease. When she left his office, she did not feel victorious. She felt something more specific than victory and less comfortable. She felt the weight of what had been done, fully understood now, all at once, with nothing left to soften it. She drove. She did not go home. She drove south, out of the city, onto the expressway, and then off it again onto the kind of roads that did not have names on most maps. She drove to the old neighborhood where she had grown up. She parked on the street in front of a house with different curtains than she remembered. The maple in the front yard was bigger. The owners had painted the shutters a different color. She sat there while the November light went gold and then gray and then nearly dark. The neighborhood smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke and something savory cooking somewhere behind closed windows. It smelled like every version of being 12 years old and waiting for her mother to finish the Thursday house so they could take the bus home together. She put her hand on the steering wheel. She thought about Brooke's text. Just need her calm until after the birth. She thought about her mother on the bus, tired and smelling like someone else's house, and still somehow the most present, most fully alive person in every room she entered. She thought about the difference between being calm and being at peace. She started the car and drove back toward the city. Her name in a voicemail, Dee's voice, the particular crack in it that appeared only when something was seriously wrong. Clara, it is me. I know something has happened between you and Grant. You have not called in 3 months, and you always call, and please just call me back. Clara listened to the voicemail twice in her car outside the grocery store. She saved it. She did not call back. That evening, at 6:45, while she was cutting an apple at the kitchen counter, the doorbell rang. She already knew who it was. She knew the way you know things you have been both dreading and waiting for. She opened the door. Dee Harmon stood on the porch. She was wearing the coat she had bought on their last trip together, the blue one with the big buttons, and she looked like someone who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally reached the address where she was supposed to put it down. I know you know, Dee said, without preamble, the way Dee had always talked, direct and fast, and with her whole face in it. About Grant, about all of it. Come in, Clara said. Dee came in. She followed Clara to the kitchen. She stood near the table and looked at the apple and the knife and the half-eaten cracker on the cutting board, the ordinary artifacts of a Tuesday evening. "Clara," Dee said, "say something. Yell at me. Just, you are standing there like a—" "Like a— what?" Clara said. Dee stopped. "Sit down," Clara said. "I'll make tea." Dee sat. She put her hands flat on the table and looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. Her nail polish was chipped. Dee never had chipped nail polish. She was a person who touched up her nail polish the moment it showed wear because she said otherwise it bothered her the way a loose thread did. You could not stop noticing it. The kettle, the cups, the tea bags. Clara moved through these steps with deliberate, ordinary care. "How long have you known?" Clara said. Not a question. Dee was very quiet. 4 months, she said. Very small. The word landed. 4 months. Clara poured the hot water. She carried both cups to the table. She sat down. Inside, she thought, 4 months. She knew in July. I found out in April and said nothing and kept working. She found out in July and said nothing. We saw each other 6 times between July and now. We went to that art show in September. We had brunch in October. She sat across from me and ordered the eggs and asked about the nursery and talked about her sister's upcoming wedding, and she knew. "Tell me how it happened," Clara said. Dee wrapped her hands around the cup. She looked at the steam rising. "Marjorie called me in July," she said. "She said she wanted to have lunch. I thought it was one of her occasional gestures. You know how she does those sometimes? A lunch here, a gift there, something to smooth over whatever she has last said that she knows landed badly. And instead," Clara said, "she told me about the other woman." Dee's voice was very careful, controlled badly. She did not tell me her name. She said Grant had been seeing someone and that the marriage had become— She said things were complicated. She said she needed someone who cared about both of you to understand what was at stake. A pause. She said that if the situation came out badly, the baby would grow up in a custody war. She said your future. She said Clara's security was better protected if things were handled quietly and with discretion. Clara held her cup. "And," she said. Dee swallowed. "She said your mental state during the pregnancy was— She implied you were not managing the stress well. She suggested that if you found out abruptly that the shock might affect the baby." Dee's voice dropped to almost nothing. She implied it might harm the pregnancy. The kitchen was completely quiet. The radiator ticked once. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed. Inside, Clara thought, "She told my best friend that truth would hurt my baby. She made the love Dee has for me into the cage that kept Dee from protecting me. She identified exactly the right fear in exactly the right person, and she pulled that lever without hesitation. That is extraordinary. That is the most deliberate act of cruelty I have seen performed over a cup of tea in my life." "So you stayed quiet," Clara said. "I stayed quiet." Dee's voice broke completely. "And I have hated myself every single day since July. Clara, I have hated— I nearly called you 20 times. I nearly— Please say something. Please be angry." "Stop," Clara said. Dee stopped. Clara looked at her, at the chipped nail polish, and the red eyes, and the blue coat with the big buttons. At the person she had called first for every important thing in her life for 9 years. "I'm going to say something that I need you to hear," Clara said, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." Dee nodded. "I am furious, Clara said. "That is true, and I am not going to pretend it is not." She paused. "I am also not surprised. And those two things are sitting next to each other, and neither one cancels the other out. She looked at her cup. Marjorie is very good at what she does. She watched you for 6 years. She understood that the thing that would stop you from protecting me was the thing you loved most about me. She used your love for me and against you at the same time. That is not your fault. That is her architecture. Dee was crying quietly into her cup, the way she had always cried, trying not to, slightly embarrassed by it, unable to stop. That does not mean everything is fine, Clara said. It is not fine, but it is also not simple, and I am not going to perform a simpler version of it to make either of us feel better. A long silence. What do I do? Dee said. Tell me the rest, Clara said. Dee looked up. The rest, she said. There is always a rest, Clara said. What did you actually do, Dee? Not what you did not do. What did you do? Dee breathed in through her nose, breathed out. 3 weeks ago, she said, I called Marjorie. I told her I was going to tell you. That I could not. I told her I was going to call you that weekend. And she said,
Assurance?
She said Grant was planning to handle things himself before the birth. She said he had a plan to be honest with you, and she asked me to give him 2 more weeks. Dee's hands tightened around the cup. I did not fully believe her, but I wanted to, and so I said fine. 2 more weeks. And then she called Paul. Claire was still. Your housekeeper, Dee said. She called him and asked him to go through your home office while you were out. She was looking for... She suspected you had been gathering documentation. She wanted to know what you had. What did Paul do? Clara asked. He called me instead of her, Dee said. He said he did not feel right about it. He said he could not do it. She looked at Clara directly for the first time since sitting down. He quit the next day, and before he quit, he looked up the name of the best divorce attorney in the city and gave me the number. And I gave it to you under the name of a friend who had used him. Clara sat very still. Paul, she said. Paul, Dee confirmed. Wade Prescott. Referred by Dee, but originally from Paul. Her housekeeper, who had been asked to betray her and had instead given her the one tool she needed most. Clara thought about Paul. Quiet, efficient, careful Paul, who had worked for them for 4 years and never said anything beyond what was asked of him, and had apparently, in the privacy of his own conscience, drawn a clear and firm line. He quit to protect me, she said. Yes, Dee said. Inside, she thought, people make choices in the dark. Without anyone watching, without any guarantee that the choice will matter or be known. Paul made one, in the opposite direction from what he was asked, and it mattered. It mattered enormously. After Dee left, 2 more hours of conversation that was hard and real and unfinished and necessary, Clara went to the porch. It was cold. She had her cardigan, and she pulled it tighter. The oak tree in the backyard was bare now. All 3 leaves were gone. The branches were dark lines against a dark sky, and they were very still. She spoke quietly, not loudly, just to the air. I am not crazy, she said. I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Every time I thought I was imagining things, I was not imagining things. She breathed in the cold. I deserved to be told the truth, she said. Not protected from it, not managed around it. Told it. She breathed out. The hardest part, she said, is knowing that somewhere underneath everything I already knew. I did not want to know. I made myself not know, but I knew. The backyard was very quiet. She thought, that acknowledgement is not self-blame. Knowing something and not acting on it is not the same thing as causing it. But sitting with the truth of it, the whole truth, including the parts that are uncomfortable about herself, that is what comes next. That is the only direction that leads somewhere real. She stayed on the porch until the cold got into her hands. Then she went inside. She reorganized the spice rack. She did this without fully intending to. Her hands went to the kitchen and began sorting, and she stood there for 20 minutes, putting things in alphabetical order. Then she stood back and looked at it. Then she moved the paprika back to the front because she used it most and it should be reachable. She looked at the paprika. She thought, this is what people do. This is the completely irrational, deeply necessary physical act of controlling something small when everything large is in motion. The paprika in front. The world in its proper place, one drawer at a time. She went to bed. The smell of pine cleaner and something savory on the stove. Ruth Hensley's kitchen was small and meticulously organized and had a scratch in the corner of the table from a science fair project when Clara was 11. The scratch had always been there. It was as much a part of the table as the grain of the wood. Clara drove out to her mother's house on a Saturday. The drive took 40 minutes. She had made it hundreds of times in her life. She knew every turn. Ruth was at the stove when she came in. She looked at her daughter once and said, "Sit down. You look like you have been dragging something uphill." "I have been," Clara said. She sat at the table. She put her hands in her lap. She breathed in the smell of this kitchen, pine cleaner and something with garlic, and the particular quality of a room that had always been a place where difficult things could be said. Ruth set a bowl of soup in front of her. She sat down with her own. "Tell me what you need to say," Ruth said. "Not what you have been saying to lawyers and to D, what you actually need to say." Clara looked at the soup. She looked at the scratch in the table. She thought about what she actually needed to say. "I gave up my thesis," she said. Ruth looked at her. "I know that," Ruth said. "I gave it up," Clara said again. "And at the time, I told myself it was a choice, that I was choosing Grant and the life and the idea of what we were building. I told myself it was an exchange." She paused. "But it was not a choice, not really. It was a gradual thing. He never asked me directly. It was the way he talked about my advisor, the way he reacted when I had evening meetings, the way he introduced me at his work events as my wife, just my wife, with no context of anything else I was. And I kept making myself smaller, not because he demanded it, because..." So she stopped. "Because," Ruth said quietly, "because every time I made myself smaller, he was warmer," Clara said. "And I was 26 years old, and I confused his approval for love." She said the words. She had said them to herself in parked cars, and at 3 in the morning, and in the break room at Whitfield Grand to no one. But saying them here, at this table, in this kitchen, with her mother sitting across from her, that was different. The words were in the air. They were real in a way that they had only been approaching before. Ruth put down her spoon. "Your grandmother," she said, "was a brilliant woman. People always called your grandfather the brilliant one. He was a patent attorney, very successful. Everyone said so." She looked at her own hands. "Your grandmother had a law degree she never used. She spent 40 years being the wife of a successful man. When he died, she was 68, and she had these credentials she had never touched. And she told me," she said to me once, "that the thing she mourned most was not the career. It was the not asking. She never asked for what she needed. She waited for him to recognize it on his own." Ruth looked up. "I cleaned houses," she said, "because I needed to clean houses to give you the life I wanted you to have. I understand work. I understand doing what you must, but I was never the house I was cleaning. I always knew the difference between the work and myself. Do you understand what I mean? Yes, Clara said. I forgot that difference. You put it in storage, Ruth said. You did not forget it. There is a difference. Forgetting is permanent. Storage is not. Clara thought about the thesis, about adaptive reuse, the architectural practice of finding the structure worth preserving inside a building that looks like it has run its course, about what you had to strip away to understand what was still sound. She thought, I have been doing this work on other people's buildings my entire adult life. I did not do it on my own. I am going to finish the thesis, Clara said. Ruth looked at her. When the baby is settled and the legal things are settled, Clara said, I am going to finish it. I know you are, Ruth said. She picked up her spoon again. I have known that since you put it down. 2 weeks later, Dr. Elaine Foster's office. Week 34. The examination room smelled like antiseptic and the faint sweetness of the paper on the examination table. The blood pressure cuff was cool on Clara's arm. The fetal heart monitor made its steady, quick sound, a reassurance she had come to need more than she liked to admit. Everything looks good, Dr. Foster said. Head down. Good position. Good heartbeat. She made her notes. Stress levels? Elevated, Clara said. Manageable. Dr. Foster looked at her over the top of her glasses. She had been Clara's obstetrician since month 2. She had a quality that Clara had come to deeply appreciate. She observed carefully and asked only the questions that mattered. Sleep? She asked. Some nights. Eating? My mother's soup, mostly. Good woman, Dr. Foster said. Her soup or any soup, frankly, at 34 weeks. She set down her clipboard. Clara, she said, whatever you are managing right now, and it is not my business unless it becomes medically relevant, I want you to plan for after. Give yourself permission to fall apart a little after the birth. Your body is going to present a significant invoice. You need to be somewhere safe to pay it. I am building somewhere safe, Clara said. It is almost done. Dr. Foster looked at her for a moment, steady, assessing. Then she nodded, once, and picked her clipboard back up. Come back in 10 days, she said, and eat more than soup. That evening, Clara sat at her desk in the home office. The door was locked. The room was quiet. She opened her laptop. She opened a document she had not opened in 6 years. Her thesis. 60% written. The last saved version dated the spring she got engaged. The last line on the last page read, "The building always knows what it is. The question is whether anyone is paying attention." She read it twice. She did not add anything yet. She just read it. She sat with what she had written 6 years ago, by a version of herself who had not known yet what was coming, who had written this sentence about buildings without knowing she was also writing it about herself. She thought she knew, even then. That version of me knew. She closed the document. She turned off the desk lamp. She went to make tea, and then she stood at the kitchen window in the dark and watched the bare oak tree in the backyard, and she felt, for the first time in a very long time, something that was not quite peace, but was in the same direction. The click of a conference room door. The specific silence of a room full of organized paperwork. Wade Prescott's conference room smelled like printer ink and old coffee and the neutral, managed scent of commercial air conditioning. It had a long table and 6 chairs and a window that looked out at the building across the street. Nothing on the walls except a clock and a framed certificate. Clara arrived at 9:45, 20 minutes before the scheduled time. She chose the chair facing the door. Grant arrived at 10:03, alone, which told her something important. His lawyer was not here. His lawyer did not know about this meeting because the meeting request had been worded as a private, informal discussion between the parties. He came alone, because he still believed he could manage this one-on-one. He still believed that getting Clara in a room without intermediaries would give him the advantage of their history, the familiarity, the 6 years of knowing how to read each other. He was not wrong that they knew how to read each other. He was wrong about what that knowledge was worth now. He sat down across from her. He looked at her and at Wade and at the folder in front of Clara on the table. "I was not aware this was a formal meeting," he said. "My attorney should be—" "Grant," Clara said. He stopped. One word. His name. The specific weight she could give it after 6 years. "I am going to explain what I know," she said. "Then you will have time to respond. But I need you to understand that the explanation will be complete. I am not going to manage how much I say." He was very still. She opened the folder. She did not raise her voice. She did not use the words devastated or betrayed or how could you. She had rehearsed this presentation the way a good architect presents a proposal, with clarity and precision and without apology for the thoroughness of the preparation. The florist receipt, the lease at the Meridian building, the 22 months, the $400,000, the account structures, the subsidiary names, Savannah's identity attached to the accounts, the documentation that made Savannah look like a knowing participant, the text messages between Grant and Brooke, the exact language. Just need her calm until after the birth. Then it is straightforward. Marjorie's lunch with Dee, what she had said about the pregnancy, about the baby, about Claire's mental state, Paul, his refusal, his quiet, decisive act of leaving rather than complying. Each document placed on the table as she addressed it. Each one named and explained. Grant watched each one appear. By the fourth document, something in his face had changed. The management was going. Not gone yet, but going. What was underneath it was something she recognized from the parking garage on Tuesday. The expression of a man whose load-bearing walls had been removed and who was only now understanding why the ceiling was moving. The trust provisions, Clara said, specify that financial misconduct during the marriage invalidates the standard settlement clause. Wade has already filed the appropriate documentation with the court. She closed the folder. She placed both hands flat on top of it. "I am not here to destroy you," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I am not interested in a public campaign or a dramatic confrontation or anything that harms this family beyond what is necessary and what is fair." She paused. She looked at him directly. "I am here to make sure that when I leave this marriage, I leave it with what I am owed, not more, not less, what is mine." The conference room clock ticked. The building across the street was a wall of glass reflecting gray November sky. Grant sat very still for a very long time. When he finally spoke, he did not use the polished phrases she had prepared for. He did not say, "You are overreacting," or "Let us be rational about this," or "I can explain." He did not reach for any of the tools she had watched him use on other people in other rooms for 6 years. He said, "I thought you would be easier to manage." It was not an excuse. It was not an apology. It was, she realized, the most honest thing he had said to her in years. Perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to her. She thought, there you are. Underneath the gray suits and the open palm posture and the 20 years of controlled narrative, there is the actual thing. "I know you did," she said. "I've been—" He stopped. He started again. "Since year 2, I have been—" "Since year 2, she'd said. "I know when it started. I know the exact mechanism." She looked at him steadily. "What do you want to do next?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Wade. "We've already drafted the terms," Wade said quietly, from the side of the table. Those 5 words. Clara heard them and felt the full weight of what they meant. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just final. 7 months of work arriving at 5 words spoken in a level voice in a room that smelled like printer ink. She thought, I will remember this moment. I will remember what 5 calm words feel like when they are earned. After the meeting, Clara stood in the elevator with glass walls on one side, showing the city spread below, gray and vast and completely indifferent to anything happening in this building. On this afternoon, the city did not care. It had its own business. It had been here before this marriage, and it would be here after. She looked at her reflection in the glass. She was 8 months pregnant. She was in a gray dress that fit her poorly, now because she had bought it in month 4. She had a folder in one hand and her phone in the other. She had a small smear of hand lotion on her left wrist from this morning, and she had not noticed it until now. She looked, she thought, nothing like the woman Grant had married. That woman had worn heels to everything, had spoken carefully at every function, had made herself into a particular kind of surface, polished and reflective and giving back whatever the room needed from her. That woman had been very good at her job. Inside, she thought, I became someone I was not. Not suddenly, gradually, one small accommodation at a time. I became very skilled at a performance I had not auditioned for and never consciously agreed to. And the strange thing, the thing I need to say out loud somewhere, is that some part of me believed in the performance. Some part of me thought if I was perfect enough at being a Whitfield wife, it would retroactively become real. It did not become real. But I have been pretending long enough that I have to remember the difference between the performance and the person underneath. The elevator opened. She stepped out into the lobby. She put her phone to her ear. Mom, she said, can I come over? I made soup, Ruth said. Of course you did, Clara said. She walked out of the building. The November air was cold and sharp and smelled like the city. Exhaust and leaves and something frying somewhere nearby, and the particular mineral smell of air just before rain. She breathed it in. She thought, this is what honest air smells like. She walked to her car. That evening, at Ruth's kitchen table, Clara baked banana bread. She was not a great baker. She was competent, but the recipe was physical and specific and required her to measure and time and pay attention to temperature, and all of those requirements were good for her brain in the hours after the conference room. The kitchen filled up with the smell of butter and brown sugar and the particular sweetness of ripe bananas. Ruth sat at the table with her tea and did not ask questions and did not fill the silence with anything except the occasional sound of her cup being set down. Clara measured the flour. She folded it in. She set the timer. She made 2 loaves, one for here, one for Nora Tatum, who was working the evening shift at Whitfield Grand tonight. She delivered Nora's loaf at 7:30 at the staff entrance in the same parking lot where she had parked for 3 months every morning. Nora opened the paper bag. She looked at the loaf. She looked at Clara. Banana bread, Nora said. My mother's recipe. Nora nodded. She folded the bag closed. She stood in the corridor light. It is done then, Nora said. Not a question. The beginning of done, Clara said. Nora considered this. That is the harder part, she said. The beginning of done. Anyone can finish something. Starting the end takes something different. I know, Clara said. You did good, Nora said. For what it is worth, from someone who has seen a lot of rich people's messes. You did this one right. Clara stood in the staff corridor of her husband's hotel for the last time, smelling the industrial cleaner and the banana bread and the November air through the propped door, and she thought, I will miss this place. Not the work, not the back pain, the honesty of it. The specific clarity of a room where no one expected anything from you except that you show up and do the work. Thank you, she said to Nora, for everything. Come back and show me the baby when she arrives, Nora said. I will, Clara said. She walked to her car. The particular sound of a man learning there are things he cannot fix. It was not dramatic. That was the first thing she noticed. In the days after the conference room, Grant did not have a visible breakdown. He did not come home drunk or enraged or weeping. He continued to go to work. He continued to make coffee in the morning and leave the second cup on the counter, which was a habit so automatic and so old that she doubted he was aware he was doing it. But small things had changed. He came home early, 3 times in 1 week, and then 4, not dramatically early, an hour earlier, 45 minutes. He was quieter, a different kind of quiet than she was used to. Not the managed quiet of a man controlling the information he was giving out. A different quality. The quiet of someone who has been using words to maintain a structure and has stopped, and the structure has proven to be not gone exactly, but profoundly different than he thought. He set his briefcase down differently, not in the usual spot by the entryway console, on the floor just inside the door, like someone who is too tired to go the extra 6 feet. She noticed these things. She cataloged them the way she had been cataloging things for 6 years, not to use them, just because she was a person who paid attention and could not stop. One evening, he came into the kitchen while she was loading the dishwasher. He stood in the doorway the way you stand in a doorway when you have something to say and have not decided how to say it. She kept loading the dishwasher. Was there a point, he said, where if I had done something differently, was there anything that would have changed this? She held a bowl in both hands. She thought about the honest answer. Yes, she said. For about 3 years, there were moments where a different choice would have led to a different story. And after that, I think the architecture was set, she said. I think the building had decided what it was going to be, and we both stopped paying attention to it. She put the bowl on the rack, or I did, and you were always going to be who you are. He was quiet for a moment. I did not always, he stopped. I know, she said. You did not plan for it to be this way from the beginning. Things became what they became in stages. She closed the dishwasher. She turned around and looked at him directly. But at some point you made decisions, clear, deliberate decisions, and I am not going to tell you those were not your decisions. He nodded. He was looking at the floor. I am sorry, he said, not qualified, not elaborated, not followed by a but or an explanation. Just those 3 words, plainly. She looked at him. She thought about what it cost him to say that. Not because he was a bad person. She had stopped believing he was simply bad, which was its own kind of grief. But because he was a person for whom unmanaged honesty was genuinely difficult, for whom saying something without a strategy was almost physically uncomfortable. Thank you, she said. She meant it. It was possible to mean it and still be leaving. She had learned that. 2 days later, Marjorie called. 4 times before Clara answered. I think we should meet, Marjorie said, the controlled voice, but with something frayed underneath. I think we have said everything necessary through our lawyers, Clara said pleasantly. This is not about the legal proceedings. Everything right now, Clara said, is about the legal proceedings. A pause. I want you to understand, Marjorie said, that I always thought you were capable. I have always said so. Marjorie Clara said, you told my closest friend that learning the truth might harm my baby. You used my child as leverage against the person most likely to protect me. She kept her voice even. I understand precisely how you think about me. I also understand that we will be connected for the rest of our lives through this child, and I intend to be civil. That is what I am offering." A very long silence. "Civil?" Marjorie said. "Civil," Clara confirmed. She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her hand. She thought about what civility actually was. Not warmth, not forgiveness, not the performance of a relationship that did not exist. Just the reliable, dignified minimum. The thing that protected Eleanor from being pulled in half by the people around her. That was enough to offer. It was all she was willing to offer. And it was also, she recognized, more than Marjorie deserved and more than Marjorie expected, which made it, in its quiet way, a form of power. Brooke Whitfield came to the door on a Thursday, empty-handed, without the usual armor of a gift or an occasion. Just Brooke, standing on the porch in her coat, looking like someone who had recently lost several years of confident certainty about who she was. "I am not expecting forgiveness," Brooke said. I needed to say it to you, directly, not through a lawyer." "Brooke," Clara said. Brooke stopped. "I believe you mean it," Clara said. "But you are not going to—" "Oh, no," Clara said. "I am not going to tell you that it was fine. It was not fine. You made choices." She paused. "But you were also recruited into something your mother designed before you had enough distance to see what it was. That is a different kind of culpability than what Grant chose. I know the difference." Brooke's eyes were wet. She pressed her lips together. "When the baby comes," she started. "She will know her aunt," Clara said. "That is not in question." Brooke looked at her. Something crossed her face that was not gratitude exactly, too complicated for that, but was in the same family. "How are you this—" Brooke stopped. Tried again. "How are you not angrier?" "I am angry," Clara said. "I have been angry for 7 months, but anger takes up space I need for other things now." She looked at Brooke steadily. "And I found that when I was honest about all of it, the whole truth, including my own part, there was less room for the kind of anger that just burns things. More room for the kind that moves you forward." Brooke said nothing for a moment. "She's going to be okay," Brooke said. "The baby. She has a good mother." "Yes," Clara said simply. "She does." An email from Wade Prescott that evening at 9:15. She read it at the kitchen table in her pajamas with a cup of chamomile tea going cool beside her. "Savannah Cole has agreed to provide testimony regarding the financial documents. She has filed independently as well, a civil complaint regarding the fraudulent use of her name and identity. Her attorney and I have been in contact. The two cases are now mutually supporting. The documentation is stronger as a result." Clara read it twice. She closed the laptop. She sat with it. She thought about what Savannah had chosen. Not the quiet option, not the settlement and the silence and the rebuilt life that no one ever asked about. She had chosen the harder thing, the thing that required showing up and saying what happened and attaching her name to a public record. Clara thought, she could have disappeared from this story. She had every practical reason to. Instead, she stood in it and told the truth. She thought, there are people who choose integrity in the dark, without an audience, without knowing if it will matter. Paul had been one. Savannah was another. She made a note on the paper beside her laptop. Not flowers, something else, something that acknowledged courage without making it sentimental. She would figure out what that was. She would send it. The baby came 3 weeks early on a Tuesday, which was, Clara thought afterward, a very on-brand choice for a daughter of hers. She was standing at the kitchen counter at 2:15 in the morning, making tea because she had not slept before 2 in the morning in 6 weeks when the first contraction arrived. It was not what she had expected, not a sharp thing, more like a deep, insistent tide. beginning in her lower back and moving through her and then receding, leaving behind a kind of stunned awareness. She stood very still. She put her hand on the counter. She waited. 4 minutes later, the second one arrived. She timed it. She breathed through it. She called Dr. Foster's service. She called her mother. She packed the bag she had packed and repacked 3 times in the last 2 weeks. She did not call Grant. She thought about it. She stood in the quiet kitchen at 2:30 in the morning, her bag by the door, and she thought about it and decided to wait, not from cruelty, from practicality. There was nothing he could do right now. There was nothing she needed him to do right now. She needed her mother. Ruth arrived in 38 minutes, which Clara calculated meant she had already been up when the phone rang. They drove to the hospital through empty streets. The city was different at 3 in the morning, quieter, less managed, more honest about what it was. Concrete and light, and a great deal of empty space between things. Clara handled 4 more contractions in the car. Ruth held her hand in the back seat and did not say anything except, "Breathe." Clara breathed. At 4 in the morning, between contractions, in the labor room that smelled like antiseptic and the clean cotton of the hospital gown, Clara texted Grant. She wrote, "Labor started, St. Michael's Hospital. Not an emergency. You do not need to come, but I thought you should know." She put the phone face down on the bed. He arrived in 22 minutes. Ruth directed him to the waiting area with the specific, polite, absolute authority of a small woman who has been underestimated her entire life and has learned to use that precisely. He waited. Clara labored. 11 hours. In those 11 hours, she thought about many things. About the thesis, still waiting on the laptop, about the warehouse on Archer Street that Wade's assistant had told her about and that she had driven past twice, about Nora eating soup in the 4th-floor break room, about Ruth on the bus, tired and present, about Eleanor, the name she had decided on in month 5, for reasons she could not fully explain, except that it sounded like someone who arrived knowing exactly what she was. She thought about what she had expected to feel when this moment came. She had expected more drama inside herself, more complexity, more grief or triumph or some cinematic convergence of everything. What she felt was focused, just focused. This was the work. This was the actual work. Not the conference rooms and the documents and the 7 months of strategic patience. This, right here, was the thing she had been moving toward the whole time. Eleanor Ruth Hensley was born at 2:47 in the afternoon. Small and pink, and immediately, loudly, specifically herself about the whole situation. They placed her on Clara's chest. Clara looked at her. Inside, she thought, "Oh, there you are. I have been doing all of this for you, and I did not know yet what you looked like. You look like someone I have always known. You look like the person I have been getting ready for my entire life." She held her. The room smelled like antiseptic, and the particular warmth of a small body, and something else she did not have a word for. Something that was all of it at once. Ruth in the corner of the room was completely silent. Clara looked over. Ruth was looking at the baby with an expression that was not composable into any single word. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she was not moving. "Come here, Mom," Clara said. Ruth came. She stood beside the bed. She looked at Eleanor with the full, unmanaged face of a woman who had spent 60 years being practical and had just been undone by a 6-pound baby. "Hello, Eleanor," Ruth said. Her voice was not quite steady. "We have been expecting you." Clara allowed Grant into the room after an hour. He came in quietly. He stood at the bedside. He looked at the baby the way you look at something you were not fully prepared to understand. All the management was gone. She had never seen his face like this, without the layer of control between him and whatever he was actually feeling, without the strategic calculation underneath every expression. He looked, she thought, like a person, just a person, encountering something that was larger than his ability to manage it. He reached out one hand, very carefully. Eleanor grabbed his finger. He made a sound she had no category for. He looked away, toward the window, and then back at the baby, and the expression on his face was the truest thing she had seen from him in 6 years. "Her name is Eleanor," Clara said. "Eleanor Ruth Hensley." He looked at the last name. He understood it. He nodded. "That is right," he said. She watched him take it in. Not just the name, but what the name meant. He was her father, not her owner, not the name on the door of the house she would grow up in. Her father, connected to this child in a way that had nothing to do with trust provisions or management strategies or any of the architecture he had spent years building around everything. Just her father. "She is perfect," he said. "Yes," Clara said. "She is." 5 days after Eleanor was born, Clara signed the divorce papers. She signed them at her mother's kitchen table. Morning light through the window. Eleanor asleep in the borrowed bassinet in the next room, making the small, self-important sounds of a baby who had opinions about sleeping arrangements. Ruth had made coffee and then gone to the living room to read, which was her way of giving Clara the room. Clara sat with the papers. She read every page. She had learned to read carefully. From her thesis advisor, and from her mother, and from Wade Prescott, and from 3 months of reading hotel room floor plans to understand where the dust collected. She signed at the bottom of the last page. She put the pen down. She picked up her coffee. She thought, this is what landed feels like. Not the dramatic release she had sometimes imagined. Not a crash or a collapse or a great exhale. Just the solid, factual feeling of the ground. After a long flight, when the plane finally touches the runway and you feel the reality of it through your whole body, not relief, exactly, just recognition. This is where you have been going. You are here. Ruth appeared in the doorway. "Done?" she said. "Done," Clara said. Ruth came in and sat across from her at the table with the scratch in the corner. She looked at her daughter, and she said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have liked you very much." Clara looked at her. "I mean the version of you that you are right now," Ruth said. "Not the managed one. This one." "This one has spit up on her sleeve," Clara said. "Yes," Ruth said. "That is the one I mean." The sound of a building being opened for the first time. The click of a lock. The specific give of a door that has been closed for a while. The rush of cold air that has been held inside a space with no one in it. Clara stood in the doorway of the commercial space on Archer Street on a Tuesday morning and breathed in what the building smelled like. Old brick, sawdust, some previous tenant's paint, cold concrete and metal, and the particular quality of space that has been waiting. She stepped inside. The space was larger than it looked from the street. The ceilings were 14 feet, and the morning light came through 2 original loading dock doors that someone had, brilliantly, converted to glass at some point in the building's history. The floors were original wood, scarred and thick and solid. One wall was exposed brick, the color of dried clay. She had a notebook. She had been making notes in this notebook for 3 weeks. Not plans exactly. Observations, the way the light moved, the angle of the glass doors at 8 in the morning versus 11, where the structural columns were, what could stay and what needed to come out to understand what the space actually was. She thought, Adaptive reuse. She thought, find the structure that is worth preserving. Strip away what is covering it. Pay attention to what the building is telling you it wants to be. The contractor she had met for coffee arrived at 8:15. His name was Marcus Webb. He was in his late 40s. He had a handshake that meant something and a way of looking at a space that she recognized. The way a person looks when they are seeing the potential rather than the current condition. He walked the space. He looked at the ceiling. He knocked on the exposed wall. He crouched to look at the floor. These floors are good, he said. You sand them down, they will look like new. I do not want them to look like new, she said. I want them to look like themselves. He looked at her. Okay, he said. Good answer. He stood up. So, client or architect? Both, she said. He smiled, the smile of someone who liked a clear answer. Best kind of project, he said. 3 months after Eleanor was born, Clara sat in her apartment, the one she had moved into 2 weeks before the birth, that was hers in every room and every corner, with Eleanor on her chest at midnight. The apartment smelled like the lavender diffuser she had bought herself, her own lavender, not Marjorie's. Eleanor was 3 months old and had opinions about the approved rocking motion and the consequences of deviating from it. Clara rocked the approved motion, the specific, precise, Eleanor-endorsed motion. Outside, the city made its nighttime sounds. A car, someone's music, brief and passing, the building settling. Inside, she thought, I am a 32-year-old woman with a 3-month-old baby and an unfinished thesis and a warehouse on Archer Street that currently smells like sawdust and possibility. I have 4 people in the world I trust completely. I have a mother who made soup and a lawyer who said 5 words that changed everything, and a housekeeper who drew a line, and a hotel worker who called my banana bread classic. I do not have a marriage. I do not have the life I was managing for 6 years. I cannot remember ever being more myself. Eleanor made a small sound, a satisfied, sleepy sound, the sound of someone settling. I know, Clara said. Me too. Dee came on Sundays. They had been rebuilding, slowly and imperfectly, and without any pretense that it was going back to what it was. What they were building instead was something different. More load-bearing, Clara thought. Less decorative. Dee held Eleanor with the specific tenderness of someone who understood exactly what Eleanor represented and treated her accordingly. On a Sunday in late winter, Dee looked up from the baby's face and said, You seem like yourself. I am myself, Clara said. No, Dee said. I mean, you seem like the version of yourself from before. The one who argued about buildings and ate cereal for dinner and called me at 11 at night because she had a thought about load-bearing walls. That version, Clara said, is now a mother and a business owner. She makes actual food. But she is still in there. Clara looked at her daughter, at Dee, at the Sunday afternoon light through the apartment windows, which was the specific pale gold of early spring. She was always there, Clara said. I just stopped inviting her to things. Dee was quiet for a moment. I am sorry, Dee said. Not for the 100th time, and not as a reflex. I mean it specifically. I am sorry I let myself be used to keep you from what you needed to know. I know you are, Clara said. I know. She leaned forward and took Eleanor back. Eleanor adjusted to her mother's arms with the absolute certainty of a person who knew exactly where they belonged. We are going to be okay, Clara said. Not to Dee specifically, to the room, to the afternoon light, to the version of herself sitting in her own apartment, holding her own daughter on a Sunday, 3 months into the rest of her life. Yes, Dee said. I think we are. Clara called her old thesis advisor on a Wednesday morning in March. Professor Edwin Hartley had retired 2 years prior. He lived now in a house with a large garden somewhere outside the city and had, according to the colleague who gave Clara his number, been gardening with the same obsessive focus he had once brought to architectural theory. The phone rang 3 times. He answered on the fourth. "Professor Hartley," she said, "this is Clara Hensley. You supervised my—" "I know who you are," he said. His voice was the same, dry and precise and warm underneath. "I have been wondering when you would call." Clara paused. "You have been wondering." "For 6 years," he said. "What happened to you? Your draft was the most interesting thing that had come through my office in a decade." She laughed. She had not expected to laugh. "I put it in storage," she said. "Well," he said, "take it out." "That is why I am calling," she said. "I am ready to finish it." A brief silence. "Good," he said. "I still have my copy. Come for lunch next week and we will talk about the revisions." "You still have your copy?" "Of course I do," he said. "I save the work that matters." After she hung up, Clara sat at her kitchen table for a moment. She thought about what it meant to have someone keep a copy of your best work for 6 years without being asked, to simply know that it would be needed again, eventually, and to act accordingly. She thought about the people who had done that for her in various ways. Ruth, with the savings account and the practical advice. Wade, with the 5 words. Paul with the refusal. Nora, with the soup and the 17 years of honest observation. Even Savannah, with the choice to stand in the truth rather than step away from it. People who held things while you were not able to hold them yourself. She thought, I want to be that kind of person, in return, for Eleanor, for the people who come after. On the day the permits cleared for the Archer Street warehouse, Clara drove there alone. She parked in front. She sat in the car for a moment. Not because she needed to, just because she had come to appreciate the specific quality of the moment before a thing begins, the held breath of it. She thought about the first line she had written in her thesis, a long time ago. The building always knows what it is. The question is whether anyone is paying attention. She had written that about brick and steel and glass. She had not known, when she wrote it, that she was also writing it about herself. She got out of the car. She walked to the door. She put the key in the lock. She turned it. The door opened. The building exhaled dust and light and cold air and the particular smell of an old thing that has been waiting patiently to become what it always knew it was. She stepped inside. She stood in the light from the loading dock windows. The glass door she had not yet ordered. The floors Marcus Webb had said would look like themselves once they were sanded. The exposed brick wall the color of dried clay. She opened her notebook. She uncapped her pen. She began. Grant came on Wednesdays. He arrived at 5:30. He sat with Eleanor for an hour. He brought things she was too young to use, educational toys, books with bright colors, a tiny sweater with a duck on it that Eleanor regarded with the polite suspicion of an infant who had not yet decided about ducks. Clara went to the kitchen and made tea while he sat in the living room with his daughter. She did not listen from the doorway. She gave them the room. She gave them the time. This was not forgiveness, not in the simple, clean sense of the word. It was something she had chosen deliberately, with full awareness of what it cost and what it was worth. Eleanor would need a father. Grant would be one in the way he was capable of being. And Clara had spent enough of her life managing the distance between what people were and what she needed them to be. She was done with that work. She made her tea. She listened to her daughter make sounds in the other room. the specific, growing vocabulary of a baby who had opinions. She thought, she comes from a long line of women with opinions. She smiled. She drank her tea. On a Tuesday evening, 6 months after Eleanor was born and 4 months after the divorce was final, Clara sat at her kitchen table with her laptop. She opened the thesis document, the last saved version from 6 years ago. 60% complete. The last line still there, where she had left it, waiting. The building always knows what it is. The question is whether anyone is paying attention. She read it twice. Then she scrolled down to the blank space after the last sentence. She thought about what came next, what she had learned since she wrote that line, about buildings and about herself, about the patience of things waiting to be seen for what they are, about the work of stripping away what covers the structure until what is worth preserving is visible and clear. She put her hands on the keyboard. She wrote the next sentence, and then the one after that. Outside, the city made its nighttime sounds. The apartment was warm. Eleanor was asleep in the next room, breathing the deep and absolute breath of a person who had nothing to worry about tonight and knew it. Clara wrote. She wrote with the rhythm she had been building toward for 6 years. Not the careful, managed rhythm of a woman performing competence, but the real rhythm underneath, the one that came from actually having something to say. She wrote for 2 hours. When she stopped, she was at 68%. She saved the document. She closed the laptop. She sat in her kitchen in the quiet, and she thought about all of it, the full arc of it. The Tuesday morning in November with the cart in the hallway, the parked car and the silent phone, the cafe with Savannah and the rain on the windows, Dee at the kitchen table with her chipped nail polish, Marjorie and her lavender perfume, the conference room and 5 quiet words, her mother's soup and her mother's scratch in the table, and her mother's 30 years of knowing the difference between the work and herself. She thought about Eleanor grabbing Grant's finger. She thought about Nora saying, "You did this one right." She thought about the building on Archer Street and the dust motes in the light from the loading dock windows and the feeling of a space that has been waiting to find out what it is. She thought, I spent a long time being a version of myself that fit into a frame someone else built. I was good at it. I believed in it some of the time, and then I stopped. Not all at once, not dramatically, I just stopped. One Wednesday morning, I knocked on a door in a hotel corridor, and I said housekeeping. And I meant it. I meant, I see what is here. I know what needs to go. I know what is worth keeping. And I got to work. Starting over does not feel the way people say it will feel. It does not feel like freedom at first. It does not feel like a door opening or a light coming on or any of the things people say when they are trying to make loss sound like gain. It feels like standing in a building with no furniture yet, with all the windows showing you what is outside, with every room empty and possible and not yet decided. It feels like the held breath before things begin, and then you begin. That is enough. That has always been enough. She got up. She checked on Eleanor, asleep, one small fist near her face, entirely at peace with the world. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to the window. The city outside was the city, constant and illuminated and going about its own enormous business. The same city it had been before all of this, the same city it would be tomorrow. She stood at the window for a while. She thought, I am here, I am myself, I am paying attention. She thought, that is the whole story. That was always the whole story. She went to bed, she slept.
Before we begin, if this story speaks to something in you, hit like, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let's begin. She did not get her happy ending by destroying him. She got it by becoming someone who no longer needed him to be anything at all. That is the thing I want you to sit with. Clara did not win because she was perfect. She did not win because she was flawless or fearless or some impossible version of a strong woman. She won because she was honest, first with herself, then with everyone else. And that kind of honesty, the deep, uncomfortable, taking inventory kind, is the hardest work a person can do, because it requires you to look at not just what was done to you, but also what you allowed, what you accepted, what you quietly folded yourself into because it was easier than asking for what you actually needed. Clara gave up her thesis, not because anyone forced her, but because every time she made herself smaller, he was warmer. And she was young, and she was in love, and she mistook his approval for love. How many of us have done that? How many of us have made ourselves smaller? In a relationship, in a job, in a family, because the reward for shrinking felt safer than the risk of taking up the space we were entitled to. This story is not a story about a bad husband. It is a story about a woman who forgot the difference between the work and herself. And then remembered, not in one dramatic moment, not in one confrontation or one document or one conference room, but slowly, deliberately, in parked cars and break rooms in her mother's kitchen, in the rhythm of cleaning someone else's floors while building her own case, in the act of saying, I know what I saw, I am not imagining things. I deserve to be told the truth. There is a version of this story where Clara explodes, where she screams and posts and confronts and burns every bridge she can find, and it would have been satisfying for a moment, and it would have cost her everything. Instead, she chose something harder. She chose to be the most honest person in the room, in every room. And honesty, real honesty, the kind that costs you something, has a gravity to it. It pulls the truth toward it eventually. It always does. If you are in the middle of something right now, something you are not ready to talk about, something you are still gathering your strength around, I want you to hear this. You do not have to perform your pain to prove it is real. You do not have to react loudly to be taken seriously. You do not have to be anyone's version of brave. You can be quiet. You can be patient. You can be, like Clara, methodical and dignified and deeply privately furious and move forward anyway. Starting over does not feel like a door opening, not at first. It feels like standing in an empty building. All the windows, all the space, all the uncertainty of what it is going to become. And then you begin, one room at a time, one true sentence at a time, one choice that is actually yours. That is enough. That has always been enough. Thank you for spending this time with this story. If it gave you something, even one sentence that landed somewhere true, please share it with someone who needs it today. Leave a comment below. Tell me what moment stayed with you. And if you are here for the first time, welcome. Subscribe and stay. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories about women who paid attention. Stories about what happens when they do. This content was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team, crafted with the intention of bringing meaning, healing, and the kind of life lessons that remind us who we are and who we are still becoming. Every word in this story was chosen with care for you.